Hey there. Tonight, we wander somewhere damp, quiet, and infinitely alive. The air smells like rain, even if it hasn't fallen yet. And there's a softness beneath your steps that feels like walking on a sponge made of centuries. You don't need to pack anything. Just your curiosity and maybe a blanket, because this story happens under the forest floor where warmth is more suggestion than reality. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start walking through a forest that looks almost too alive for nighttime. The leaves shimmer like they've been brushed with oil, and everything moves just slightly, as if the entire world is breathing with you. The first thing you notice isn't a tree or an animal. It's the faint, unhurried rhythm of the ground. Every step sends a sigh through the soil, soft and springy underfoot. You pause, and then you see them. Tiny domes rising from the moss. Some the size of your thumb, others tall and elegant, like miniature umbrellas waiting for rain that will never come. They look shy, almost deliberate, like they've been waiting for you to lower your gaze. Mushrooms, hundreds, maybe thousands, glisten in the moonlight, like wet porcelain. You kneel because something in you knows they deserve reverence. You might think they're plants, but they're not. They belong to a kingdom all their own, fungi, the quiet architects of the planet. If the forest is a city, the mushrooms are its street lamps, gentle, glowing, and older than anything else here. Scientists estimate fungi appeared around 1 billion years ago. Before mammals, before trees, maybe even before your most persistent thoughts about tomorrow. You reach out and touch one carefully because you remember someone once said that mushrooms breathe too. And they do in a way. Just like you, they take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. The entire forest exhales together. Trees breathing in what mushrooms let go, mushrooms drinking what trees exhale. It's a quiet conversation that's been going on since long before humans learned how to whisper. You smile at that because suddenly it feels like you've stumbled into a secret that no one bothered to hide. It was just too patient to announce itself. The forest doesn't shout. It hums. A breeze slips through the trees, carrying a faint scent of damp bark and something sweetly metallic, spores maybe, or just the perfume of decay turned beautiful. Scientists still argue whether mushrooms choose when to release their spores or if it's all luck and humidity. But tonight, that debate feels like a lullaby of data. You're not here for the answers. You're here for the feeling of not needing them. You take another step and your foot sinks slightly into the soil. There's a cushion beneath you made of decomposed leaves, roots, and countless microscopic threads called hyphae. Each thread is thinner than a hair, but together they form mycelium and the unseen body of the fungus that stretches for miles. You imagine your foot pressing into a living web that connects everything, the pine tree ahead, the moss under your hand, the mushroom glowing at your feet. You're not walking on the forest. You're walking through it. If you could shrink yourself 1,000 times smaller, you'd see highways of white filaments wrapping roots like affectionate serpents. Nutrients, water, and even messages flow along these paths. A tree injured by lightning might tell its neighbors through the fungal web. A sapling shaded by taller trees might receive extra carbon from its elders through the same network. It's an ancient version of social media, except nobody argues and everyone shares. You chuckle softly at that thought. The forest invented cooperation long before we invented comment sections. Your eyes adjust to the dim light, and you notice the mushroom's subtle glow. Not all of them, just a few, their edges tinted green like a low battery signal in the dark. They're not magic, though it feels that way. The glow comes from luciferin, the same molecule fireflies use to light up summer fields. When it reacts with oxygen, it creates a faint, cold light that even the most advanced LED would envy. No heat, no waste, just quiet radiance. You could almost believe the forest designed them as night lights for lost wanderers. But science has a less poetic guess. Maybe the glow attracts insects to spread their spores farther. Maybe. Scientists still debate the exact reason. But honestly, the idea that mushrooms invented their own marketing strategy feels perfectly in character. A branch snaps somewhere behind you, and your heart jumps just enough to remind you that you're still awake. Then you remember, you're surrounded by life that doesn't hunt or roar. The danger here is in the beauty. It's in realizing that while you were worrying about tomorrow's deadlines, the world beneath you was quietly building new soil cleaning toxins and keeping trees alive. You sit down back against a trunk covered in velvety moss and watch the mist creep through the roots. There's something strangely human about mushrooms. They pop up overnight, live briefly, and disappear without complaint. Some live for hours, others for decades. But they all serve a purpose, even the ones that rot untouched in the dark. Maybe that's comforting. Maybe that's the lesson tonight, that even quiet lives matter, even fleeting ones contribute. A soft rain begins to fall, more mist than storm, dotting your arms with cool droplets. The mushrooms seem to grow happier, their caps opening wider, drinking in the moisture. You lean your head back, eyes half closed, and imagine yourself part of this slow-breathing ecosystem. Your breath syncs with theirs. Inhale, exhale, repeat. You can't tell where you end and the forest begins anymore. And maybe that's the point. The next time you see a mushroom, you'll remember this, how it wasn't just a decoration on the forest floor, but a doorway into something much older, much wiser, and infinitely calmer than human noise. You let your hand rest on the damp moss, feel the pulse of unseen life beneath it, and smile. Somewhere under there, millions of tiny fungal filaments are trading secrets with the roots, building tomorrow's forest grain by grain. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you realize the forest doesn't just breathe, it waits. For you to slow down enough to hear it. You linger there, half listening to the rain and half listening to yourself breathe. Then the thought sneaks in, beneath all this moss and loam, there's a secret network buzzing with more life than any city skyline. Not noisy life, not the kind that honks or glows with billboards, but a subtle pulse, a steady, silent communication line, running through the roots and into the earth's heartbeat. You shift slightly your hand, brushing the forest floor, and it's like pressing your palm to a buried electrical grid. Not the human kind, no sparks, no hum, but a sense that something ancient is awake under there. The scientists call it mycorrhizal networks, but you can think of it as the wood wide web. Imagine that the trees, the mushrooms, the shrubs, all DMing each other in a whisper language made of sugar and minerals. Every root tip connects with a thread of fungus thinner than silk, and that thread connects to another and another, until what you have isn't a tangle but a map of generosity. Trees don't hoard here, they share. One tree, rich in sunlight, sends carbon through the network to another stuck in the shadows. In return, the fungus delivers phosphorus and nitrogen minerals no tree can reach on its own. Mutualism at its finest. You might think the forest is still, but it's actually full of deals being made in real time. Somewhere beneath your knees, a pine just traded a pinch of glucose for a spark of life-giving mineral. Somewhere else, an ancient oak is silently supporting its offspring through the same fungal network, like an invisible parental allowance. It's funny humans built the internet and congratulated themselves on connecting the world while mushrooms had already done it hundreds of millions of years earlier. And they did it without crashing once. You reach down, pick up a bit of soil, and crumble it between your fingers. It feels alive because it is. 1 teaspoon of healthy forest soil can contain 10 kilometers of fungal filaments. You blink because that number sounds made up. But it's real. 10 kilometers curled and woven and breathing beneath the surface, making sure every living thing up here keeps going. There's something humbling about that. Knowing that under every step you take, there's an underground conversation happening. When a tree gets attacked by pests, it can send distress signals through this network. Its neighbors respond by boosting their chemical defenses. Scientists still argue whether this counts as communication or just chemistry, but either way, it works. The forest protects itself through the same underground network you're sitting on. You can almost hear the dialogue if you listen hard enough. Hey, I'm losing leaves. Hang in there, buddy. Sending some extra carbon. And maybe that's just your sleepy mind turning science into whispers, but that's fine. You're allowed to anthropomorphize when the night smells like rain and the world feels kind. The irony, of course, is that the mushrooms you see, the cute umbrellas scattered across the ground, are only the fruit. Like apples on a tree, they're just the reproductive part. The real fungus, the thinker, the builder, the sustainer, lives underground in that infinite lacework of mycelium. The mushroom you admire for a few days is just a temporary antenna sending and receiving life before melting back into the soil. You imagine your own thoughts working that way, only a few visible, most of them buried deep, feeding things you don't even realize are growing. There's a certain calm in that realization. You don't have to show everything to be alive. You just have to stay connected. The forest doesn't do ego, it does equilibrium. You brush the dirt from your fingers and notice a fallen log covered in a mosaic of fungi. Each patch a different color: white, ochre, mint green, even lavender. Some are crusty, others soft like velvet. You think about how they're all tapping into the same conversation below, digesting the dead wood cell by cell. It's not decay, it's participation. One log's death fuels 1,000 lives. It's not exactly a cheerful thought, but it's strangely soothing. The forest doesn't waste anything. Everything feeds something else. You smile at the idea that even the oldest, loneliest tree will one day become part of the network it once leaned on. A kind of reincarnation, but without the drama. Just pure, recycling, efficient, silent, beautiful. Some scientists believe mycelium can even remember things, at least in a primitive way. When they expose it to stimuli, it reacts differently next time, like it learned. Imagine that memory without neurons, thought without a brain. Maybe intelligence doesn't need a skull. Maybe it just needs patience. You tilt your head watching a slug glide across a toadstool like it's strolling through a glowing city. The slug leaves a silver trail that glitters faintly under the moonlight. The mushroom doesn't seem to mind. It just stands there collecting dew, doing its slow work of existing. you can't help but laugh quietly. Humanity's greatest dream is to build interconnection, and here's nature's version running perfectly without a single update or ad interruption. You think of your Wi-Fi at home dropping during a storm, and it suddenly feels adorable compared to the resilience under your feet. Then another thought surfaces. Some researchers suspect that this fungal web might not just transfer nutrients, but information. Trees warning each other of danger, timing their growth patterns, maybe even coordinating reproduction seasons. It's poetic and unnerving. Scientists still debate whether that's intelligence or instinct, but in the quiet, that difference doesn't seem to matter. You rest your head against your arm and breathe in the damp air. Somewhere far away, a night bird calls its echo, bouncing between trunks like sonar. And for a moment, you can almost sense data traveling through roots and filaments all around you. Messages of light and sugar, of death and renewal. Maybe you think the planet has always been whispering to itself. We just got too loud to hear it. A soft joke crosses your mind. You wonder if trees ever gossip. That birch over there, total drama. Sent me too much nitrogen last week. You chuckle, the sound swallowed by moss. Above you, a few drops fall from a leaf and slide down your cheek. They taste faintly of earth, like mineral tea. You lick your lips and let the flavor linger. It's not sweet, not bitter, just clean, honest, ancient. You close your eyes and imagine shrinking, following one high-fall strand deep into the soil. The world narrows into a glowing tunnel, white threads wrapping like constellations. It's not dark down there. It's warm, almost maternal. Every filament pulses faintly, carrying sugar molecules and whispers of intention. It feels like being inside a heartbeat, slow, reliable, eternal. And the thought drifts through your mind as you finally exhale. The ground beneath you isn't still. It's the most dynamic, connected, cooperative system on Earth. You've just been too human to notice. The rain fades to a mist, leaving the forest glistening in silver streaks. You push yourself up slowly, brushing tiny specks of dirt from your palms. They stick anyway, because that's what life does here. It clings. It mingles. Every handful of soil you touch is part history, part promise. And somewhere, under all that dampness, the slowest architects in the world are still at work, the fungi quietly rewriting the laws of decay. You take a step toward a fallen branch and kneel. The bark crumbles in your fingers, soft as cake. Beneath it, a fan of white threads spreads like lightning, frozen mid-strike. Mycelium patient, determined, endlessly hungry. It's eating, but not greedily. This isn't destruction. It's construction, only in reverse. Fungi are the recyclers of the biosphere. Without them, the world would be buried under mountains of dead plants, animals, and forgotten dreams. They break everything down, wood leaves bones, and rebuild it into the soil that grows tomorrow's forest. Every breath you take, every apple you've ever eaten, owes something to a fungus that once turned rot into nutrients. You run a finger through the pale filaments, surprised at their firmness. You were expecting mush, but they're surprisingly strong. Fungal cell walls are made of chitin, the same material in insect shells. So yes, that delicate mushroom has more in common with a crab than a carrot. You smile thinking of that the next time someone calls mushrooms vegetables. The funny part is, these tiny decomposers are basically nature's janitors, and yet they make art out of it. The log under your hand smells sweet, woody, almost like vanilla. That's decomposition in progress, the perfume of patience. Each strand of fungus releases enzymes carefully dissolving tough cellulose and lining the materials that make trees stand tall. Bit by bit, what was once impenetrable becomes soft enough for roots, worms, and eventually seeds. You remember reading once that the biggest source of carbon storage on land isn't trees, it's soil. And who builds that soil? The fungi, quietly, humbly, without bragging about it in documentaries. They don't get Netflix specials or environmental awards. They just keep doing what they've done for hundreds of millions of years, breaking down the old to make space for the new. It's the kind of work humans rarely volunteer for, but here it's holy. You tilt your head and notice a small patch of puffballs clustered together near your foot. They look innocent, like tiny gray marbles. But when you tap one gently, it releases a soft brown cloud of spores. They drift upward in a slow spiral, catching moonlight like cigarette smoke. You can almost hear a faint sigh. Billions of new beginnings, each one the size of a dust grain, setting off to find their own damp corner of the world. You breathe in, and for a moment you're probably inhaling hundreds of spores. Congratulations, you're now part of the forest's reproductive process. Don't worry, they won't grow inside you. Unless you're a rotting log, you're safe. Still, it's an oddly intimate exchange, the forest lending you a little of its future. The thought makes you laugh softly. Free spores with every breath. Sounds like something nature would print on a cosmic receipt. You look closer at the puffballs and think about how absurdly efficient they are. Each one produces enough spores to populate an entire forest, if even one in a billion lands somewhere right. Statistically hopeless, yet somehow it always works. Maybe that's the secret, not precision, but persistence. A beetle crawls out from under a puffball antennae, twitching, probably unaware it's stepping through the history of the Earth's atmosphere. Sea fungi were among the first organisms to move onto land, around 450 million years ago. Back then, plants didn't even have roots. Fungi partnered with them, helping them pull minerals from rock. In return, plants offered sugars from photosynthesis. That alliance built the first soil, the same one you're kneeling on right now. So the next time someone tells you about progress, remember it started with a fungus shaking hands or Hefe with a moss. You stand and brush your knees, noticing the way the ground feels spongy beneath you. It's alive, porous, always shifting. Every time a fungus decomposes something, it rearranges the Earth's texture. Even the color of the soil depends on what kind of fungi dominated. Some make it rich and dark, others leave it pale and dry. Soil isn't just dirt, it's autobiography. Scientists still argue whether fungi actively decide where to grow or simply react to opportunity. You imagine them as little real estate agents sniffing for the perfect patch of damp decay. Nice spot, plenty of cellulose, moderate humidity, no worms yet. Let's move in. You can't help but grin. The forest is full of absurd comedy if you look closely enough. Nature doesn't rush, it just repeats its best jokes until they become truth. You wander a few steps farther and come across something stranger, a small cluster of orange mushrooms growing in a perfect circle. You found a fairy ring. In reality, it's just the outward growth of mycelium under the ground, expanding evenly in all directions. But old stories had better explanations, circles where fairies danced, where time slowed, where mortals could lose their minds if they stepped inside. You pause toes at the edge of the ring and smile. Maybe those myths weren't entirely wrong. After all, time does slow here. The air feels thicker, your pulse steadier. Maybe fairy circles don't steal you, they just remind you to stop running. You step inside the circle and sit down. The ground feels unusually soft, warm even. Maybe the fungal metabolism generates a little heat. You rest your palm against the soil. It vibrates faintly, or maybe that's just your imagination mixing science with wonder. You whisper, "You're doing a good job down here." And in the silence that follows, it feels like the forest agrees. A tiny moth lands on your sleeve, pale wings trembling like paper. It sits for a moment, then drifts off toward the glowing caps nearby. You wonder if it knows that every breath it takes, every flower it touches, depends on the fungal chemistry below. Probably not. But that's fine. The forest doesn't demand gratitude, it just keeps giving. You lie back within the ring, the canopy stretching above like green lace. The stars peek through, filtered by leaves, and the air smells of humus and promise. You close your eyes and listen somewhere below. Fungi are digesting yesterday into tomorrow. And just before sleep brushes your thoughts, you realize something simple and vast. If every act of decay feeds new life, and then maybe nothing ever really ends. It just changes flavor. When you open your eyes again, the moon has shifted. It now hangs lower, caught in the tangle of branches like a pearl in a net. Around you, the forest glows faintly, not from moonlight alone, but from the mushrooms themselves. You blink because surely your eyes are playing tricks. But no. The caps ahead shimmer in a spectrum that shouldn't exist. You crawl closer, hands sinking into the wet moss. The colors change as you move, blues that lean into green purples, that melt into ghostly silver yellows, too soft to be real. Some look like wet jewels, others like translucent wax candles left burning in the rain. You feel a childlike urge to touch one. You do. And the surface feels cool, slick, alive. Colors that shouldn't exist. That's the best way to describe them. Mushrooms have pigments beyond what most plants use. Their chemistry plays tricks with light. Some use beta-carotene for orange hues, others melanin for dark tones. And some, like the infamous mycena, interrupta, the electric blue mushroom of the southern hemisphere, just seem to pull color straight from a dream. Scientists still don't fully understand how they do it. Some suspect a combination of structural coloration and light interference, like butterfly wings. Others think it's simply chemistry we haven't mapped yet. Either way, these colors aren't random. They might protect the mushroom from UV rays, signal toxicity to predators, or just exist for the joy of it. You chuckle softly, thinking humans spend fortunes trying to replicate these colors in labs, and yet the forest tosses them out like casual miracles. You spot another cluster nearby, tiny mushrooms so white they almost glow blue under the moonlight. They look carved from bone, or maybe ice. You tilt your head and realize something strange. None of these colors clash. Even where fiery orange meets glacier white, the palette feels intentional, harmonious. The forest is an artist with infinite patience and zero ego. You crouch lower and notice something even more peculiar. A mushroom that looks like it's breathing. Its cap rises and falls in the faint breeze, catching droplets of dew that magnify its color like lenses. The reflection makes you dizzy for a second, like staring into a living gemstone. It's easy to forget that each one of these fragile sculptures grows from decay, from what's left behind. And yet, here they are, painting the forest in colors that no palette can contain. Beauty from breakdown, renewal from rot. You can't help but admire the audacity. You pluck a tiny fallen cap, careful not to uproot the stem. Its underside is a miracle of design gills radiating outward in perfect symmetry, each one thinner than a hair. They look like the pages of an ancient book, and maybe they are. Every line carries spores, each spore carrying instructions for a new network. The patterns feel mathematical, divine, and just a little smug about it. There's a term for this self-similarity. Fungal growth often follows fractal geometry, the same pattern repeating at different scales. From the branching of mycelium underground to the gills beneath a cap, it's all echoing itself. The universe clearly loves symmetry. Fungi just took better notes. You smile, and a thought sneaks in. If chaos looks this organized under a microscope, maybe you shouldn't worry so much about your messy life. Nature's perfection is built on mistakes repeated beautifully. One mushroom catches your eye bright red, perfectly round, with white speckles like powdered sugar. Amanita muscaria, the classic fairy tale toadstool. Poisonous, yes, but oddly charming. It's the kind of mushroom that would definitely have opinions if it could talk. You half expect it to ask what you're doing awake at this hour. Its scarlet hue isn't just for show, it's chemical warfare. Inside that candy shell skin lurk compounds that can alter consciousness, distort perception, and sometimes cause unfortunate conversations with imaginary squirrels. Yet to some cultures, it's sacred. Siberian shamans once used it in rituals to communicate with the spirit world. The reindeer that roam those snowy plains reportedly eat it too, leading to interesting nights. You laugh quietly, picturing tipsy reindeer dancing under the northern lights. Somewhere, nature's sense of humor is thriving. As you sit among this riot of color, the air grows warmer. Maybe it's just your imagination, or maybe the combined metabolism of millions of organisms really does shift the microclimate here. The moisture thickens. Each exhale fogs faintly in the air, and every droplet clings to your lashes like glitter. You realize that these pigments, these lights, these fleeting hues, they don't last. Most mushrooms only shine for a few days before fading to gray. That impermanence makes the colors even more precious. It's like watching a firework bloom in slow motion over a span of nights. You want to hold on to it, but the beauty insists on being temporary. Scientists still debate whether color in fungi evolved for communication or pure happenstance. Maybe it's both. Maybe the forest simply likes to surprise itself. After all, evolution has never been above a bit of art. You lean back against the nearest tree and look around again. The landscape glows in every shade of patience, green, blue, gold, white. And you, a temporary visitor, get to witness it before it all dissolves back into shadow. The forest feels like it's letting you in on a secret that creation doesn't always need meaning. Sometimes it just needs to be. You take a deep breath. The scent is damp but oddly clean. Earth and ozone wrapped in quiet. You wonder how many shades of color exist here that your eyes can't even see. Ultraviolet patterns made for insects, not humans. The forest doesn't care who its audience is. It performs anyway. Your mind drifts. You imagine lying on a canvas stretched across the forest floor, letting the pigment seep into your dreams. You'd wake up the color of moss and moonlight. A laugh bubbles up again, soft, sleepy content. You're talking to mushrooms, and somehow it feels reasonable. That's what calm does to you. It makes the world make sense even when it shouldn't. Above, a soft glow breaks through the clouds. The moonlight and the fungal light mix into something surreal. The forest looks both ancient and new, both dying and alive. You realize then that decay is just transformation, written in slower handwriting. You whisper, "You're beautiful," to the glowing caps before you. And though they don't answer, the silence that follows feels exactly like agreement. You sit there for a while, letting the last flicker of red and green light fade from your eyes. The forest has gone quiet again, but not empty, just resting the way an orchestra does between movements. Then out of the corner of your eye, you catch something faintly glowing, deeper in the underbrush. Not the quick flash of a firefly, not reflected moonlight. Something steady, soft, and eerily alive. You rise, brushing off the moss clinging to your clothes, and follow the faint radiance. Each step squelches slightly in the damp soil. The glow strengthens until the ground itself seems to exhale green light. You stop, breath held. There it is, an entire fallen log covered in bioluminescent fungi, shining like a constellation that took a wrong turn and landed on Earth. They call it foxfire, or sometimes fairy fire. To early travelers, it was proof of spirits wandering the woods. To scientists, it's chemistry at its most poetic. The light comes from luciferin, the same glowing molecule fireflies use. In mushrooms, it reacts with an enzyme luciferase and oxygen, producing a cold, ghostly glow. No heat, no flames, just silent radiance. You crouch and place your hand near the surface. It doesn't burn or hum. It simply exists as if the night decided to illuminate itself from below. It's strange, you think, how many things in nature shine only when they're dying or decomposing. Even the word luciferin light bringer feels like a cosmic joke about how beauty often emerges from decay. You move closer and see tiny threads of light weaving through the rotting bark. Some spots pulse faintly, almost like breathing. Others flicker as raindrops slide down. It feels alive in a way that electricity never does, personal, patient, intimate. Scientists still argue why fungi glow at all. One camp insists it's a form of attraction, luring insects to help spread spores. Another believes it's simply a metabolic byproduct, an accidental glow like a candle left burning after the prayer is done. Both might be true. Both might miss the point. You trace the pattern of light with your fingertip, careful not to disturb it. The glow fades when you touch, but then blooms again a few centimeters away. It's like the fungus is shy, retreating from contact. You whisper, "It's okay, I'm not here to take anything." And ridiculous as it sounds, the glow steadies. Above, mist curls through the trees, turning the air into a shimmering fog. Every droplet catches green light, scattering it like starlight through glass. You can't tell where the glow ends and the air begins. You've walked into a dream, but one built entirely from chemistry and time. You remember an old study how bioluminescent mushrooms glow brightest between midnight and dawn, precisely when nocturnal insects are most active. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe the forest just knows how to schedule its miracles efficiently. You smile at the thought, somewhere in this same forest, a beetle with no idea of its cosmic importance is carrying spores across the soil, unknowingly performing the same duty as a honeybee. Life doesn't need awareness to matter. It just needs to keep going. You lean back against the nearest tree, the bark rough and wet against your palms. For a long moment, you simply breathe. The glow softens your heartbeat. Your eyes adjust until you can make out faint halos of light under every fallen branch. It's not just one log, it's everywhere. The whole forest floor is a galaxy glowing faintly in the damp. You chuckle quietly. "So, this is what starlight smells like," you murmur. It's a joke to yourself, but it fits. The air tastes faintly metallic, like wet iron and sap. You imagine the oxygen molecules meeting luciferin in tiny molecular dances, millions of invisible reactions, flickering with elegance and purpose. If you could shrink down to the scale of atoms, you'd see entire light shows happening every second, unbothered by human eyes. You think about how many people have walked through forests like this without knowing the ground was glowing just beneath the surface. Maybe wonder doesn't need witnesses. Maybe it's enough that it exists, glowing quietly in the dark for anyone patient enough to look. A faint rustle pulls your gaze upward. A small frog hops onto the glowing log, its belly catching the green light like glass. For a moment, it looks like a lantern come to life. The frog blinks at you unimpressed, then hops off again, its tiny body briefly leaving footprints of darkness where its feet touched. The glow returns seconds later as if forgiving the intrusion. That you realize is the essence of fungi resilience without resentment. Step on them, and they'll simply regrow around your footprint, repairing the network, filling the void. No ego, no hurry. You close your eyes, and in the darkness behind your eyelids, you can still see the faint green after image. It pulses softly with your heartbeat. You imagine every human city blacked out, and only these forest lights left a mark where life still whispers. Then your mind wanders as it does when sleep starts to stretch its fingers. You think of the word bioluminescence. It sounds almost too technical for something this gentle. You prefer fairy fire. There's poetry in that, a reminder that science and myth are sometimes describing the same thing just in different languages. Scientists still debate whether this glow has any evolutionary advantage, but maybe not everything in nature needs a reason. Maybe some things just shine because they can. You tilt your head, letting the cool air settle against your face. Somewhere behind you, a night bird calls. Somewhere ahead, the fungus continues to glow. You find yourself whispering, "You're doing fine," not sure if you're talking to the mushrooms or yourself. The glow doesn't answer, but it doesn't fade either. It stays calm, constant, forgiving. And as the mist begins to rise higher, you feel something loosen inside you. The kind of release that comes when you finally accept that not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are just meant to be witnessed softly until morning comes. You stay for a while longer, tracing faint lines of light with your eyes until they begin to blur. The glow doesn't fade so much as dissolve into memory like a lantern winking out at dawn. You stretch bones cracking quietly and start walking again. The forest greets you with that same damp hush, a sound you can almost feel. After a few steps, something small catches your attention, a ripple in the leaf litter, like the earth itself just sighed. You crouch, curious, and there it is, a slender stalk bending low, a cap only half formed the color of milky tea. It trembles slightly, then stops. You realize it's not the wind. The mushroom moved. You blink, thinking you imagined it. But then under the cap, a thin tendril uncoils and snaps back almost like a muscle contracting. You're watching one of the strangest sights in the fungal world, a fungus that hunts. Not all mushrooms are patient decomposers. Some are predators, quite efficient and far more disturbing than any fairy tale creature. These fungi, usually tiny and invisible to the naked eye trap, and devour microscopic worms called nematodes. Yes, you heard that right, mushrooms that eat meat. You lean closer, the fascination overriding the faint chill in your stomach. The threads of mycelium form loops, tiny nooses that tighten the instant a worm swims through. Some species use sticky nets, others microscopic harpoons that shoot out and inject digestive enzymes. Within minutes, the prey is paralyzed, dissolved, and slurped up like soup. Nature, it turns out, has a dark sense of humor. You laugh softly, whispering, "Guess vegetarians aren't safe down here either." The idea of mushrooms hunting feels almost rude to your peaceful mental image of the forest. But that's biology for you. No matter how calm the surface, there's always a little chaos underneath. Scientists studying these predatory fungi discovered they evolved their traps from ordinary hyphae, meaning they literally repurposed parts of themselves to get better at catching lunch. If adaptability had a mascot, it would be a carnivorous mushroom in a tuxedo smirking at evolution. You picture it a mushroom wearing a monocle saying, "I prefer my nematodes al dente." You chuckle quietly at your own joke. The trees don't seem to mind. Still, something about the scene feels poetic. The same organisms that recycle forests also carry the instincts of hunters. The line between creation and consumption blurs until you can't tell which side of the story you're on. It's a reminder that even beauty needs a little hunger to stay alive. You run your fingers along the forest floor, tracing invisible patterns of power. Somewhere beneath your touch, thousands of these invisible predators are doing their work keeping soil ecosystems balanced, preventing overgrowth of microscopic life, and quietly maintaining equilibrium. It's funny you think how humans like to label everything good or bad. But in nature, everything just is. Fungi that digest worms aren't evil. They're efficient. They're part of the choreography that keeps the planet spinning smoothly. You remember reading that these fungi may even help farmers someday. Scientists are experimenting with them as natural pest control, tiny living traps that protect crops without chemicals. Imagine that future agriculture run by invisible mushroom cowboys rounding up microscopic cattle. You grin. The world's strangest sheriff wears a spore cap. But there's another twist to the story, as some fungi seem to behave almost intelligently. When multiple nematodes enter the trap zone, the fungus reacts faster, releasing more enzymes as if it can sense when a feast is worth the effort. Scientists still debate whether this is awareness or just an automatic chemical response. But still, you can't help wondering how much instinct looks like thought when it happens slowly enough. You crouch lower, trying to picture it, the vast underground web, adjusting, recalibrating, learning. Every caught worm becomes data, every digestion a kind of feedback loop. And above it all, mushrooms keep sprouting, smiling innocently. The forest doesn't reveal its secrets in a single tone. Beneath beauty lies brutality, and beneath that, balance. You start to realize that the calm you feel here isn't the absence of conflict. It's the harmony of millions of tiny negotiations happening all at once. Everything eats, everything gets eaten, and nothing complains. The glow from earlier still lingers faintly in your vision. And when you close your eyes, it merges with this new image, light and hunger coexisting in the same body. A fungus glowing to lure insects, another setting traps underground. It's like watching the forest play chess with itself, one piece at a time. You open your eyes and see something curious ahead, a fallen acorn split in two, its inside webbed with thin white veins. The shell is nearly hollowed out. Fungal hyphae again. They've cleaned it so precisely, it looks carved. You pick it up and roll it in your hand. It's lighter than you expected, fragile, almost elegant. Even decay can be art when it's done with intention. You whisper a thought aloud just to hear how it sounds in the dark. Everything here is eating and being eaten, but no one's afraid. And it's true. There's no panic here, only purpose. A beetle scuttles past your shoe, pauses and vanishes under a leaf. For a moment, you wonder if it too knows about the fungal hunters waiting below. Probably not. But then again, the forest seems to forgive ignorance. It has to, otherwise nothing would last. You take one last look at the spot where the fungus snared its invisible prey. Nothing moves now. The trap resets patient as ever. A world of silent wars and quiet grace continues under your feet, unseen but constant. As you stand and start walking again, you think about how the forest never hides its contradictions. Things can be deadly and beautiful at once. Decay can glow, death can feed life. Mushrooms can be artists and assassins. The path curves ahead, soft and dim. The glow behind you fades, and all that remains is the gentle sound of water dripping from leaves. Somewhere down the trail, another mystery waits, another reminder that you're only ever seeing a fraction of the story. And maybe that's enough. You smile at the thought and keep walking one careful step at a time into the breath of the living earth. The forest feels heavier now, not in a threatening way, but in that dense, comforting way. A blanket settles over you when the world gets quiet. You slow your steps, noticing the ground darkening under the canopy. The air is thicker here, and when you look up, you can barely see the stars anymore. It's as if the night decided to lean closer, pressing its weight into the soil. You pause and kneel again, brushing your fingers over a patch of fine dust coating the moss. Except it's not dust. It's spores, billions of them. The air shimmers faintly in the moonlight, filled with microscopic seeds drifting like invisible snow. You exhale carefully, trying not to disturb them, but it's impossible. The moment you breathe, the particles swirl into motion, glittering briefly before disappearing into the dark. This, you realize, is the true secret of the mushroom world. The mushrooms you see above ground are just the brief flare of life's candle. The real story is the spore, that tiny, weightless promise of infinity. Each mushroom produces millions, sometimes billions of spores. A single puffball can release enough to outnumber all the humans on Earth. And yet, almost none of them survive. Most will never land where they can grow. A raindrop might crush them. Sunlight might sterilize them. Only a handful will find the exact cocktail of shade, moisture, and luck to take root. You grin. So basically, mushrooms are nature's lottery addicts. And in a way, they are. Every puff of spores is a gamble on tomorrow. But they've been playing this game for hundreds of millions of years, and the odds don't scare them. Persistence beats precision every time. You pluck one puffball gently from the moss. It's soft and rubbery like an old sponge. You squeeze it lightly, and a smoky cloud bursts out, so delicate. You can see the tiny vortex it makes before fading into the air. For a second, it looks like the ghost of a thought leaving your hand. You let out a quiet laugh. Sorry, little guys, I didn't mean to start your journey early. Spores are astonishing when you think about them scientifically. Each one carries the entire genetic blueprint of its parent fungus. Inside that microscopic capsule lies everything needed to build an organism capable of breaking down forests, glowing in the dark, or outliving empires. The spore's shell, made of one of the toughest organic substances known, sporopollenin, can survive fire radiation, even the vacuum of space. Scientists have found fossilized spores that are hundreds of millions of years old and still intact, which means theoretically somewhere in the layers of ancient rock a spore might still be waiting patiently, absurdly just, for the right conditions to wake up again. Talk about commitment. You imagine one of those ancient spores floating through deep time, through the ages of dinosaurs and ice, through extinction after extinction, quietly muttering, "Any day now." You smile. The patience of fungi makes your deadlines feel like jokes. The air stirs and a faint golden mist drift across your path spores, illuminated by moonlight, slicing through the canopy. You can almost see their dance. They spiral upward in invisible thermals, catching the slightest breath of wind. Scientists have discovered that spores actually engineer their own flight. They release droplets of water to create microbursts of air, propelling themselves upward. You whisper, half impressed, "You little geniuses." That realization makes you rethink what it means to be alive. Intelligence doesn't always need neurons or bones or ambition. Sometimes it's in the way a particle understands the wind well enough to survive 1 billion generations. You lean back on your heels and imagine the entire planet breathing, spores, forests, deserts, cities, oceans, all sharing this invisible dust of potential. Every breath you take right now probably contains hundreds of them. A quiet exchange between you and the rest of life. It's almost unsettling knowing that the air itself is alive. And yet it feels reassuring too, like the universe has a safety net woven from fungal dreams. You stand brushing the dirt from your palms and notice how the light changes when you move. Spores catch the moonlight differently at each angle, creating a faint shimmer like static in the air. For a brief second, it looks like the forest is glittering. Tiny lights blinking on and off, as if whispering to one another. You laugh softly. Okay, fine. You're showing off. But in truth, you're the intruder here, walking through a microscopic storm that's been happening since before mammals had names. The forest doesn't perform for you, it just is. And somehow that's even more beautiful. You take a step forward, and your foot lands in a soft patch of moss that releases another puff of spores. The air turns golden again for a heartbeat. You're covered in the future now, wearing tomorrow like perfume. You think about how scientists once used spore dispersal patterns to track wind currents across continents. These tiny travelers hitch rides on the smallest drafts, sometimes crossing oceans. There's a good chance that right now, spores from the very mushroom you touched are drifting toward the next valley, or maybe the next continent. The world's borders don't mean much to fungi. You pause and close your eyes, feeling the air move against your skin. If you concentrate, you can almost sense the direction of the breeze, carrying spores toward somewhere unseen. It's humbling to realize that even in stillness, you're part of motion, part of the endless exchange between life and air. Scientists still debate how long spores can stay viable in the atmosphere. Some say days, others say centuries. The truth probably depends on the species, the conditions, and how stubborn the universe feels that day. You smile again. Nature never gives easy answers, only beautiful ones. When you open your eyes, the mist of spores has drifted away. The air feels lighter, clearer. But the knowledge lingers somewhere right now. A few of those microscopic wanderers are landing on perfect ground. And if you return here years from now, maybe you'll find a ring of mushrooms rising exactly where your breath once sent them. The idea makes you grin. You've accidentally helped the forest plant its next generation. a quiet collaboration between you and the invisible. You whisper, "Good luck, little spores," then take another slow breath. You half expect them to answer to shimmer one last time in the air, but they're already gone off, chasing the next patch of light, the next drop of rain, the next story. The forest air feels richer now, heavier with moisture and the quiet perfume of decay. You walk slower, letting your fingers brush along every mossy trunk and lichen-covered stone. The night no longer feels like darkness. It feels like depth layers stacked in time. You're surrounded by evidence of everything that's ever lived here, still busy being useful. And that's when the thought hits you. Fungi don't just recycle life, they heal it. You spot a cluster of strange, shaggy mushrooms bursting from a fallen birch tree. They look like tiny white pom-poms, soft, delicate, almost cute. Heritium erinaceus, you recall, the lion's mane mushroom. You've seen it before in photos sold in capsules praised by health blogs. But here, in its natural habitat, it feels less like a supplement and more like an oracle. You crouch and run a finger gently across one of the fronds. It's surprisingly firm, its filaments dangling like the beard of an old forest monk. People call it the mushroom for the mind. Modern research backs that up lion's mane contains compounds that stimulate nerve growth and may even help repair damaged neurons. The forest, it seems, figured out neuroregeneration long before hospitals did. You smile to yourself. So, you're basically the therapist of the woods. Nearby, another species sprouts from a decaying log, dark brown and glossy like polished wood. Reishi, the mushroom of immortality in ancient Chinese medicine. Used for over 2,000 years to strengthen the immune system and promote longevity. You remember a line from a paper once: Ganoderma lucidum may modulate the body's stress response. Translation: it literally helps you chill. You exhale and realize that might be why you feel so calm here. Maybe you've just been inhaling the spores of ancient relaxation. The forest, it turns out, is a pharmacy older than civilization. Penicillin came from a humble Penicillium mold found on accident when a petri dish got contaminated. That mistake saved over 200 million lives. Other fungal discoveries gave us cholesterol-lowering statins, anti-rejection drugs for organ transplants, and even migraine medication. Fungi don't brag about it. They just quietly rewrite human history between decompositions. You find that thought oddly comforting, that the cure for almost everything has already existed for millions of years, quietly waiting for us to notice. You wander deeper and spot a dead stump speckled with bright orange fungi. It's Cordyceps militaris, the one that looks like tiny flames poking from wood. Another healer known to boost energy balance, metabolism, and improve oxygen efficiency. Of course, that's the polite version. The famous relative of this fungus prefers parasitizing insects, taking over their bodies, sprouting from their heads. But we'll save that little horror for later. For now, you prefer to think of it as a forest doctor. Everywhere you look, mushrooms are doing quiet miracles, turning poison into nutrients, waste into food, chaos into structure. You pick up a fallen branch and break it open. The inside smells faintly sweet like wet almonds. That's fungal activity too, enzymes transforming complex molecules into simpler, useful ones. In that moment, you realize that the forest doesn't separate medicine from daily life. Every breath, every decay, every scent is a treatment. Healing isn't something that happens after illness. It's continuous maintenance, the slow balancing act of an ecosystem that never clocks out. You think of how disconnected humans have become from that rhythm. We isolate medicine in bottles and hospitals when nature just lets it fall from the sky and grow underfoot. The forest heals not with urgency, but with rhythm. You breathe it in and feel something unclench inside you. A faint breeze carries the smell of damp bark and ozone. It smells like something ancient and alive, a scent you can't buy, only breathe. Maybe this is what calm really means, not silence, but perfect cooperation between countless microscopic lives. You sit down near the lion's mane patch and lean against the birch trunk. The bark is cool and peeling slightly, revealing streaks of soft pink wood beneath. You imagine how the fungus penetrates this wood not violently, but gently, cell by cell, unlocking nutrients as if reading a secret language. The forest doesn't heal by fighting, it heals by understanding. You think of a scientist you once read about, Paul Stamets, the man who believes fungi could save the world. He discovered species that digest crude oil, absorb radiation, and even protect bees from viruses. Imagine that mushrooms repairing ecosystems we've broken. It's not fiction, it's simply what they've been doing forever. We just finally noticed, and still there's mystery left. Scientists still argue whether fungi choose their hosts, whether they adapt consciously or chemically. Some experiments show mycelium altering its enzyme production based on what material it touches, almost as if it's thinking about how best to digest it. Intelligence, but not the kind that fits neatly into human categories. You tilt your head, smiling. Maybe the forest doesn't need brains. It just needs memory. You pluck one small lion's mane filament and hold it to the light. Its tiny spines catch droplets of moisture, reflecting them like beads. You think about all the people sipping mushroom coffee for focus, popping reishi capsules for sleep, stirring chaga powder into smoothies for antioxidants, and how the real miracle isn't in the trend, but in the timeline. These organisms evolved solutions millions of years before humans could even stand upright. There's humility in that realization. You take another deep breath, let it fill you. The air smells faintly sweet now, earthy and restorative. You imagine every molecule of oxygen has passed through a fungal spore, a tree's leaf, maybe even a lion's mane cap. You are literally inhaling their legacy. It's no wonder the forest feels medicinal. It's been dosing you since you arrived. You stretch out your legs and lie back watching faint mist curl through the canopy. Somewhere nearby, droplets gather on the tips of mushrooms, glinting like liquid glass before falling to the earth. Each drop, you realize, carries microscopic life fungal spores, enzymes, bits of DNA, all drifting back into the soil. A cycle of renewal so efficient, it makes technology look clumsy. You whisper to the air, "You were the first doctors, weren't you?" And the forest, in its usual silence, answers with another drop falling, another scent deepening, another wave of calm rolling through your chest. You don't need words for confirmation. The proof is already breathing with you. The air cools again as you rise, brushing bits of bark from your sleeve. The night has deepened into that strange in-between hour, when time feels paused. The moon's higher now, pale and thin, and every sound seems magnified. The drip of water, the shuffle of your shoes, the faint hum of something unseen. You don't have to walk far before the calm bends into curiosity. Ahead, through a veil of mist, the forest opens into a small clearing. And there they are, mushrooms you recognize instantly from 1,000 news articles and whispered conversations, pale, slender caps with a bluish tint. The psilocybes, the so-called magic mushrooms. You approach carefully because they don't look magical. They look humble shy, even their stems thin as straws. But their reputation glows brighter than any bioluminescent fungus. Within them lies psilocybin, a molecule that can bend perception, melt boundaries, and dissolve the walls between self and universe. Or so people say. You crouch and smile. The rebels of the kingdom. Science has finally caught up with the myths. Researchers now know psilocybin mimics serotonin in the brain-opening neural pathways usually closed to conversation. It temporarily turns off the default mode network, the part that maintains your sense of I. When that network quiets, people report feelings of unity, compassion, and timelessness. A chemical short vacation from the ego. You think of it as the forest's way of reminding humans that the world doesn't revolve around them. You eat one tiny mushroom and suddenly realize you're not a protagonist, you're background scenery. And that's a relief. Still, there's debate. Scientists argue whether these experiences reveal something true or simply rearrange your internal mirrors. Are you glimpsing higher consciousness or just a hallucinatory echo chamber? The line between enlightenment and chemistry is slippery. Yet either way, the result often feels the same humility. You imagine early shamans kneeling in the dark, swallowing these little teachers, feeling the forest breathe through them. They must have thought they were talking to gods, and maybe they were. Modern neuroimaging would call it cross-network synchronization, but semantics doesn't kill magic, it just gives it Latin names. You smile at that thought. The first therapy session was probably held right here under a mushroom cap. A breeze stirs, and one cap tips slightly, releasing a faint dust of spores that glimmer like dream residue. You feel a quiet respect for how delicate yet powerful they are. A single dose can reroute trauma-dissolved fear or open empathy in ways talk therapy sometimes can't. And yet they grow unnoticed, trodden by deer and ignored by hikers. Nature hides its greatest tools in plain sight. You sit cross-legged in the clearing, the air still around you. Somewhere, a night frog croaks lazily. The scent of soil is richer here, deeper. You think about how much of human history has been shaped by accidental fungus encounters, bread rising beer, fermenting medicine, curing, and consciousness expanding. Mushrooms have been co-authors of civilization, though they never demanded credit. You picture ancient people watching the world ripple after eating these strange fruits of decay. Maybe they saw spirits because they needed metaphors for neurons firing in unfamiliar ways. Maybe they learned reverence because some lessons only make sense when logic steps aside. A quiet laugh escapes you. Maybe humanity's first philosophy lecture was psychedelic. You glance again at the psilocybes, their caps moist with dew. Scientists recently discovered they use psilocybin as a defense mechanism to deter insects, ironically. Yet somehow, that same toxin became a doorway for human insight. A chemical meant to say, "Don't eat me," turned into "open your mind." Life's sense of humor never misses. You think of all the current studies, psilocybin easing depression, helping terminal patients face death, without fear, rebooting brains stuck in loops of anxiety. The results are almost mythic, and yet they come from something that looks like it could be blown away by a sneeze. You take a slow breath. The air tastes faintly metallic here, charged somehow, as if the forest itself is aware of being observed. Maybe that's projection. Or maybe it's the mycelium beneath sensing your weight, sending a ripple through its network, the way a pond feels a pebble. Scientists have recorded electrical impulses traveling through fungal networks, pulses that vary like primitive signals. not language as we know it, but still communication. You wonder, half smiling, if the mushrooms are gossiping about you. Another human trying to be profound again. The humor warms you. You like the idea that the forest laughs at human seriousness. After all, what's more grounding than realizing the cosmos can make jokes? You shift position and notice a faint hum in your ears, the kind that happens when the world is too quiet. You close your eyes and imagine what it would feel like to listen from the inside out. No boundaries, no categories, just vibration. You think about how psilocybin increases brain connectivity, linking regions that usually never talk. If the brain were an orchestra, mushrooms are the rogue conductor, inviting every instrument to play at once. And somehow, the result isn't chaos, it's harmony. When you open your eyes again, the clearing feels different, as though the trees have moved slightly closer. Their trunks stand like patient guardians, listening. You realize that even without ingesting anything, you've begun to feel the effect, the psychological gravity of being in a place that knows itself so deeply. Scientists still argue whether nature can influence consciousness directly, or if humans simply mirror what they observe. But standing here surrounded by organisms that breathe calm, it's hard to doubt that peace is contagious. You whisper softly, maybe that's the real trip. You stay until the last bit of mist fades and the stars peek through again. The psilocybes glisten one more time before blending into shadow. You don't take any because the forest itself is already enough, a hallucination made of light and patience. As you turn to leave, a gust of wind scatters more spores into the air. They catch a moonbeam sparkling for half a second, and then they're gone. Tiny messengers of chemistry and mystery continuing their eternal experiment. The wind picks up as you walk, soft but steady, carrying a faint tang of minerals and rain. The forest begins to thin, and soon the trees part just enough to reveal an open stretch of earth shimmering faintly under the moonlight. It looks different here, smoother, drier, almost metallic. You stop and tilt your head, realizing this isn't ordinary soil. It's a test field, one of those places where scientists study how life clings to the edges of possibility. And scattered across the ground are small circular containers covered by transparent domes. Inside each one, mushrooms. Some familiar, some strange muted pinks, dark purples, pure white spheres. They're growing in simulated Martian soil. You blink, half expecting to see a NASA logo carved into the dirt. But no, this is just your imagination catching up to science. Because yes, mushrooms in space is not a bedtime fantasy. It's reality in the making. In 2019, a team of researchers from NASA and Stanford tested whether fungi could survive the conditions of space. The results were absurdly promising. Spores endured cosmic radiation vacuum and freezing temperatures, all the things that make space sound like a bad neighborhood. Some even started growing again once they returned to Earth. You exhale, smiling. Of course they did. Mushrooms don't quit. The resilience of fungi is legendary. Their spores are wrapped in some of the most durable biological armor known to science, layers of proteins and chitin that laugh in the face of radiation. A few scientists even suspect that life on Earth might have arrived through spores drifting through space, panspermia they call it. The idea that somewhere billions of years ago, a microscopic fungal seed hitched a ride on a comet and landed here ready to start something green and glorious. It's not a mainstream theory, but it's a delicious one to think about. You picture a little spore spinning through the void for a few million years, tapping on planets like doors. until Earth finally answered. You whisper, "So you're the original astronauts." The air feels thinner now, or maybe you're just imagining the vacuum of space pressing at the edges of your thoughts. You walk among the imagined domes, crouching beside one. Inside a cluster of oyster mushrooms, fans out perfectly, their delicate gills glowing faintly under artificial light. You remember reading that fungi can grow on cosmic radiation alone, converting energy directly the way plants use sunlight. That's right. Mushrooms can feed on radiation. There's a species found in Chernobyl Cladosporium sphaerospermum that literally eats gamma rays. Instead of chlorophyll, it uses melanin to absorb the energy and convert it into growth. You can't help but laugh quietly. You thrive on death and disaster. That's metal. You think about what that means for the future human colonies on Mars, covered not in metal domes, but living fungal walls. NASA has already proposed myco-architecture structures grown rather than built. Lightweight spores could be sent ahead of astronauts, designed to weave into walls, floors, even air filters. No bolts, no bricks, just biology. Imagine stepping into a mushroom house on Mars, the walls breathing faintly, adjusting to temperature and radiation like skin. Inside air purified by living matter. Outside the endless red desert. The idea sounds like science fiction, but fungi make it sound inevitable. You sit down on a rock, smiling into the quiet. Maybe that's why you've always felt calm around mushrooms. They remind you that life's job isn't to dominate space, it's to occupy it gracefully, to make shelter wherever it lands. You picture a tiny spore drifting in orbit, the last survivor of some forgotten planet, still waiting patiently to grow again. It's humbling. Humans build billion-dollar rockets for a few minutes of weightlessness. Fungi just hitchhike on the wind and survive eternity. You whisper, "You're probably laughing at us, huh?" The breeze answers by rustling the grass, and for a second it sounds like faint laughter. Then another thought slips in, how fungi might become our companions in the future, not just our food or medicine. Researchers are experimenting with mycelium-based electronics, growing circuits from fungal fibers that can conduct electricity and even store information. Living computers. Mushrooms that could remember, calculate, maybe even learn. The idea is half mad and half genius, exactly the kind of balance nature loves. You imagine future astronauts growing mycelial habitats that double as data networks. Houses that heal themselves and think. Fungal walls pulsing softly with stored information, breathing servers made of life instead of plastic. The forest rustles again, as if approving. You take another breath, and the scent of damp soil grounds you. The cosmos feels closer now, not distant or cold, but continuous. Maybe Earth isn't a blue marble floating in emptiness. It's a petri dish in a cosmic lab, and mushrooms are the first successful experiment. Scientists still debate how far fungal spores could really travel through space without breaking apart. Some claim they could last thousands of years, others millions. But nobody disputes their resilience. Spores have survived simulated Martian atmospheres, extreme radiation bursts, even being shot from cannons to mimic meteor impacts. And somehow, every time a few live, you smile, shaking your head. The universe keeps throwing curveballs, and you just germinate. The idea makes you oddly comforted. If the world ever ends, maybe life won't. Maybe some microscopic bit of fungal dust will carry us forward, quietly rewriting itself into the next story. You stand looking around at the imagined domes, the glowing caps, the faint shimmer of frost on the ground. You picture one of those spores escaping, catching a solar wind, and drifting beyond the solar system. Not lost, just expanding the definition of home. The night feels enormous, and yet, beneath your feet, the same quiet persistence hums. Earth or Mars forest or vacuum, it doesn't matter. Fungi don't conquer space. They inhabit it. You breathe out slowly, your words barely louder than the wind. When we finally leave this planet, we'll take you with us, won't we? And maybe that's fitting. After all, mushrooms have always been the first to arrive and the last to leave. You stay still for a moment, staring at the sky between the branches. The stars above seem less like distant suns and more like spores themselves, tiny glowing seeds drifting through cosmic darkness, waiting for somewhere fertile to land. It's a comforting thought. Maybe the universe is just a giant mushroom quietly growing in ways too slow for us to see. You chuckle softly because you know where your mind is headed next, into the darker corners of the fungal kingdom. The parts that make scientists both fascinated and mildly terrified. You step forward, following a path where the air feels oddly dry, and soon you see something faintly orange clinging to a cluster of dead leaves. Its beautiful thin tendrils rising like coral capped with delicate burnt orange spires. But you know this one. Cordyceps, the famous puppet master of the forest. You crouch the damp air, brushing your face as you look closer. Beneath the orange stalks, something lies half buried in the dirt. It takes you a moment to recognize the shape, a mummified insect. The remains of an ant, its body frozen mid-crawl, as if it had stopped to listen to a secret that cost it everything. You whisper, "You poor thing," though part of you knows it's pointless. This isn't tragedy. It's precision. Cordyceps is not like other fungi. It doesn't wait for death, it delivers it. When a spore lands on an insect, it germinates, sending microscopic filaments into the host's body. The fungus spreads, weaving through muscle and nerve, feeding from within. And then, this is the eerie part. It begins to control behavior. The infected ant climbs to a high point, locks its jaws on a leaf, and dies there. From its head sprouts the bright stalk you're seeing now, bursting with new spores ready to rain down on the next unsuspecting colony. Nature, you think, has a flair for the cinematic. You stand and take a step back. There's a strange beauty in it, the perfect, horrifying efficiency. No waste, no emotion, just equilibrium. The forest doesn't moralize. It just optimizes. Scientists studying Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, the species famous for infecting ants, discovered that the fungus doesn't actually enter the brain. Instead, it wraps around it, controlling the host by hijacking its muscles with chemical precision, like pulling the strings of a marionette without ever touching the puppet's thoughts. There's something both elegant and sinister about that. You murmur half to yourself. So it's empathy that makes it scary. And maybe that's true. You feel pity for the ant because you can imagine being controlled. Because humans know what it's like to lose agency, to be moved by forces unseen. The fungus, though, has no malice. It's just doing its job. Life feeding on life, the oldest story there is. You crouch again, studying the delicate tendrils glowing faintly under the moon. In Japan, some species of cordyceps are actually prized as medicine said to enhance endurance and energy. The same organism that turns insects into zombies helps humans run marathons. The irony is so perfect, you can't help but smile. It's a reminder that nature's villains are often double agents, deadly to some, miraculous to others. You pick up a fallen twig and gently nudge the tiny fungal stalks. They sway like coral in an invisible current. You imagine the spores releasing into the night, each one hunting for a host, each one holding the same instructions: find life, rewrite it, repeat. Scientists still argue about the evolutionary genius behind it. How does a fungus learn to manipulate behavior so specifically? Why does one species control ants, another caterpillars, another spiders? The patterns are so refined, it almost feels like intent. But intention, as far as science knows, is a human word. You whisper, maybe the forest just writes symphonies too slow for us to hear. The longer you stare at the cordyceps, the less monstrous it looks. It's strangely peaceful, glowing softly in the undergrowth, finishing its cycle in silence. The ant beneath it has become part of the soil, part of the roots, part of the network that sustains everything else. Even manipulation, in the end, feeds the system. You think of how easily humans draw lines, parasite versus host, good versus evil. But the forest draws circles. Everything loops back. Even domination becomes nourishment eventually. You let that thought sit with you for a while. The forest feels like a cathedral now, each organism playing its role without complaint. Somewhere nearby, another insect stirs, another spore waits, and the endless balance continues. You smile faintly. All right. You whisper to the fungus, you win. You're terrifyingly perfect. The stillness deepens. You notice the faint ticking of droplets falling from leaves, each one hitting the soil with soft percussion. Somewhere behind you, the wind moves through the trees like breath. You imagine the entire forest inhaling at once, drawing in spores, exhaling life. A quiet joke drifts through your mind. If zombies ever walk the earth, they'll probably be gardeners. You grin, shaking your head at yourself. But you can't shake the awe. Cordyceps doesn't just consume it, orchestrates. It knows timing, chemistry, temperature. It knows patience. In a way, it embodies everything humans struggle to learn how to change the world without overcomplicating the process. You stand again, feeling the damp soil press beneath your boots. For a moment, you picture humanity from above, a colony of ants driven by unseen instincts, climbing towards something bright and final. The thought should be chilling, but it isn't. It's grounding. Because maybe, like the ant, you're not controlled, you're just part of a cycle too vast to see. You take one last look at the orange stalks, bow slightly in mock reverence, and continue walking. The glow fades behind you, but its lesson stays that power and peace can coexist in the same breath. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. Even the frogs have stopped calling. The forest holds its breath, and you find yourself doing the same. There's a heaviness to this part of the woods, not frightening, just enormous. It feels like walking through the lungs of something asleep, but aware of your presence. You can't say when you start noticing it, but the ground feels different here, firmer, steadier. The soil underfoot is laced with something unseen but immense. You kneel, press your palm to the earth, and feel a faint vibration, as if the heartbeat of the world itself hums below. And then you remember. Somewhere not too far from here in Oregon actually lurks one of the strangest organisms on the planet. Not a whale, not a tree, not even a coral reef, but a fungus. One single fungus, Armillaria ostoyae, the honey mushroom. Except it's not a mushroom, not really. Those little honey-colored caps people see on the surface. Those are just the fruiting bodies, the tip of a creature so massive that it stretches across 2,385 acres of forest floor. That's nearly 10 square kilometers of continuous mycelium, the largest living organism on Earth. And it's been alive for thousands of years. You lean back on your heels and whisper, "So the forest really does have a brain." Scientists call it the humongous fungus, a name so silly it almost insults the grandeur of it. Imagine an underground web, older than human civilization, older than the pyramids, older than most mountain ranges. It spreads slowly, cell by cell, feeding on roots, connecting trees, digesting wood, breathing through the soil. It's both alive and ancient, both builder and destroyer. The funny part, most people walk right over it without knowing. They might picnic on it, plant flowers above it, even build cabins over it. And all the while, that single organism waits below, quiet, patient, unstoppable. You laugh softly. You're literally living under someone's lawn. It's comforting and eerie all at once. To think that something so large can exist in near silence, that life doesn't need noise or movement to dominate. This fungus weighs hundreds of tons, yet it doesn't roar, doesn't pulse visibly, doesn't demand worship. It simply is. You wonder what it feels like to be that old, to grow, without hurry, to touch everything, without owning it. Maybe this is what eternity looks like. Threads, not thrones. Scientists still debate how one organism can remain genetically identical across such a vast expanse. Is it one being or millions of connected individuals? The lines blur. But the DNA tells a story of sameness, one code, repeating through time, adapting as needed, but never truly breaking apart. It's the biological equivalent of an unbroken whisper carried across millennia. You stand again and take a few steps, imagining each one landing on the same living entity. The trees around you, pines, birches, oaks, all might be part of its silent empire. Some are symbionts feeding it. Others are its victims, drained slowly by its appetite. And yet the forest thrives because of it. Destruction and creation sharing the same pulse. You can't help but grin. You're basically the original internet and the original apocalypse. There's an almost comic grandeur to it, a superorganism hiding under hikers and deer and roots. Not plotting, not scheming, just existing beyond comprehension. You picture it like an old monk meditating underground, aware of everything, but never intervening unless it must. Maybe that's why the forest feels so calm. The giant beneath it regulates everything, a fungal guardian, maintaining balance through patience. You're walking across the back of a living god, and the god doesn't mind. You crouch again and pick up a handful of soil. It smells sweet, rich, faintly metallic, the scent of decay and growth coexisting. Somewhere in that handful could be filaments from the same organism that stretches for miles. You can't see them, but you can sense their presence like veins under skin. You remember reading that armillaria glows faintly in the dark when disturbed, thanks to a chemical called luciferase, the same one that lights up bioluminescent fungi. Imagine the entire forest floor glowing under moonlight, if it ever decided to reveal itself. Billions of threads weaving light like constellations below your feet. You shiver, not from fear but awe. The earth itself is alive in ways we barely understand. And here you are, one small human walking across a body that might outlive your entire species. You whisper, if you're listening, you're doing an amazing job. A soft gust of wind stirs the trees, and for a moment the forest feels like it exhales in reply. You could almost believe it understood. You think about how armillaria survives so long. It grows underground, shielded from weather, feeding on wood and soil. When a tree dies, Its roots become food. When another tree grows, its roots offer partnership. Every death fuels a new beginning. Maybe that's the secret to endurance, not resisting change, but digesting it. You smile because that sounds like something you should probably write down before you forget. A squirrel darts across your path, scattering dry leaves. You glance after it, noticing how even its tiny movements are part of the larger pattern. The fungus beneath doesn't need to control anything, it simply allows. Every creature that walks here contributes to its story. Even you. You stand there for a while longer, trying to wrap your head around it, one being stretching farther than sight, older than language, pulsing just below awareness. And yet, it never demands recognition. It doesn't advertise its existence with flowers or roars. It prefers anonymity. You sigh softly. The biggest thing in the world, and you're humble about it. That thought lingers as you keep walking. The ground feels different now, alive, deliberate, forgiving. Every step sinks slightly, cushioned by millennia of patience. Somewhere under your heel, a network continues to grow, digest, repair, and connect. And you realize something quietly profound. Maybe immortality doesn't mean living forever. Maybe it just means living well enough to never need to start over. You glance at the moon one last time before it slips behind the trees. The light on the forest floor softens to silver, and everything falls back into rhythm. The dripping leaves, the distant rustle, the whisper of roots. Beneath it all, a silent giant dreams on, unconcerned with whether anyone ever knows its name. You walk quietly deeper into the stillness, and the sound of your footsteps fades until it's just breath and heartbeat. The air feels warmer here, heavier with the smell of wet soil. You crouch, scoop up a bit, and let it crumble between your fingers. It's soft, fine, almost silky. The kind of soil gardeners dream about, the kind of soil that remembers everything. This, you think, is the real work of mushrooms. Not the glowing, not the hunting, not the hypnotizing of insects. This is their art, the patient, endless act of turning death into poetry. Every leaf that falls, every creature that dies here, eventually meets the same fate. It all dissolves into the gentle chemistry of fungi. Enzymes break the tough bonds of wood proteins and chitin, returning them to the ground as something new. What you call decay. The forest calls translation. You press your palm into the earth. It's cool, but somehow alive. You imagine the mycelium threads moving beneath millions of tiny filaments, shifting like whispering hair. They're carrying carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus currencies of the underworld, traded back and forth until balance is restored. You remember a line from a scientist who once said, "Soil is not dirt, it's biography." Every handful contains fragments of everything that's ever lived here. Mushrooms are the editors, deciding what stays, what transforms, what becomes the next paragraph of life. It's a comforting thought that nothing ever really ends. The forest just keeps rewriting itself. You stand again and look around. A fallen tree lies nearby, covered in green moss and delicate shelf fungi. The wood is so soft now, you could push your fingers through it. You do, and the texture is strangely pleasant, like sponge cake. Beneath that softness are centuries of memory rings, of time reduced to nourishment. There's a smell too, so rich, bittersweet, faintly musky. It's not unpleasant. It's the scent of renewal and progress. You inhale deeply, letting it fill your lungs. It's the same smell that follows rain on dry soil, that moment when the world feels scrubbed clean. Scientists call it geosmin, a compound, produced by microorganisms, including certain fungi. Humans are extraordinarily sensitive to it, so sensitive, in fact, that we can detect a single part per trillion. You were designed to recognize the smell of life returning. You laugh softly. So that's why fresh rain feels like hope. You walk on, tracing your hand along another trunk. The fungi here form strange shapes, brackets, shelves, curling ribbons of white and brown. They grow in deliberate spirals, each layer a quiet testament to persistence. Some of these are turkey tail mushrooms, you realize Trametes versicolor, known for their vivid bands of color like brush strokes across bark. You've heard of them before. Traditional healers have used turkey tail for centuries, and modern science now studies them for their immune-boosting compounds. Another small miracle hiding in rot. You smile. Even decay has health benefits. You kneel and trace the rings with a fingertip, feeling how smooth they are. Each one marks a wave of growth, another attempt by the fungus to reach the air to release its message of spores. Every ring is a record of effort, and somehow that feels human. You've left marks like that too, layers built on what came before, invisible to most, but essential to who you are. You sit back on your heels, watching a tiny beetle crawl across the log. It pauses beside one of the bracket fungi and disappears underneath. The forest is full of such quiet migrations. Everything here feeds shelters or becomes something else. It's not decay, it's dialogue. Scientists still argue about the exact role of fungi in soil formation. Some say they're the architects binding particles together. Others insist they're more like editors, refining and rebalancing. But maybe they're both the builders and the storytellers, weaving every fallen thing back into coherence. You think of a line you once read: "Mushrooms teach impermanence better than any monastery." You smile because it's true. The forest doesn't waste time mourning what fades. It just transforms it. A breeze passes, carrying the smell of wet bark and something faintly sweet. You realize the entire ground beneath you is a living document, revised endlessly by unseen authors. You're standing in the autobiography of the planet, and mushrooms are its patient scribes. You crouch again, whispering to the soil. You really are the quiet ones doing all the work, aren't you? No answer, of course. Just the faint tick of the water dripping from a leaf, landing in rhythm with your breath. You think about all the things humans throw away: bones, paper, wood, even entire buildings, and how fungi will eventually inherit them all. Nothing escapes their slow, gentle justice. Even plastic, in some cases, is beginning to meet its match. A few species of fungi have evolved the enzymes to digest synthetic polymers. The planet's cleanup crew clocking in for overtime. You can't help but grin. You're going to outlive us all, huh? The forest hums quietly, and you take that as a yes. You sit down again, leaning against the log, the dampness seeping through your clothes. It's strangely pleasant. The air smells thick with stories. You close your eyes and imagine the soil working beneath you. Microscopic empires exchanging nutrients, millions of fungi breaking down the old into the new. You picture it as music, a slow, earthy symphony playing on frequencies too low for ears to hear. If you listen hard enough, you think you can almost catch it, the faint pulse of renewal, the rhythm of decay becoming growth. And for a moment you feel at peace with every ending you've ever feared. You whisper, half laughing. You turn death into compost and somehow make it sound romantic. And maybe that's the secret of the forest. It doesn't hide its endings, it composts them into beginnings. Every broken thing here is busy becoming beautiful again. You lean your head back and close your eyes, letting that thought sink in. You've been walking through life's recycling system this whole time, and it's more graceful than anything humans have ever built. Somewhere beneath you, the fungus continues its work, slow and tireless, converting sadness into softness. You exhale and the forest exhales with you. The trail narrows until it feels less like a path and more like a corridor. The trees here are older, their bark deeply furrowed, their roots snaking over each other like the veins of time. You step carefully, watching the ground glow faintly with patches of pale gray fungus. The air feels ancient, thicker, quieter, as if sound itself has slowed down. It's easy to forget standing here that mushrooms are a new chapter in a story that began long before trees ever learned to reach upward. You kneel beside a stone slick with moss, brushing away the damp film of lichen, and run your thumb across its smooth surface. There, faint but clear, are dark streaks frozen into the rock traces of something that lived here nearly 500 million years ago. Fossilized fungi. You whisper, "You were here before the flowers." It's true. The earliest known fungus fossils date back roughly 1 billion years, hundreds of millions of years before the first plants colonized land. Back then, the continents were barren, no trees, no grass, just volcanic rock and the sea. And yet fungi were already there, spreading through that empty landscape, digesting stone, turning mineral into soil. They were the original pioneers of land life, the patient builders of Earth's first ecosystems. You tilt your head, imagining that world in alien terrain of green-black slime and towering fungal structures. Some reached more than 20 feet tall, these ancient giants called prototaxides. For nearly 100 million years, they dominated the planet's surface. Scientists once thought they were trees, but chemical analysis revealed they were fungal. Imagine walking across a landscape with no leaves, no flowers, only silent pillars of fungus stretching toward a sky still learning what blue means. You exhale softly. The first forests didn't have trees. That realization reshapes everything. The ground you stand on exists because fungi made it. They broke down rock into dust, wove minerals with carbon, and made soil real fertile soil for plants to root in when they finally appeared. In a sense, every tree is a second-generation life form. Fungi were the parents, and the forest was the child. You brush your fingers through the moss again, feeling that lineage under your skin. Everything above ground owes its existence to what happened below millions of years before. And yet the descendants of those first fungi are still here, still working, still whispering beneath the roots. There's something tender about that endurance. Evolution has rewritten countless species, erased entire dynasties, but fungi never needed to start over. They just adapted. Where plants chased sunlight, fungi learned to thrive in shadow. Where animals evolved bones and hunger, fungi evolved patience. Scientists still argue over what exactly prototaxides were doing up there, standing like fungal towers for millions of years. Were they absorbing sunlight through symbiotic algae or just acting as spore launch platforms? The debate continues, but the result is undeniable. They prepared the world for everything that came next. You think of that, how the planet's earliest architects left no monuments, no temples, no fossils shaped like crowns, just quiet soil. The most selfless legacy imaginable. You find yourself whispering. You built paradise and then stepped aside. The forest answers with a low creak as a branch bends in the wind. It feels like acknowledgement. You continue walking, tracing your fingers along stones streaked with thin lines of white mineral veins once carved by ancient fungal roots. Even rocks carry fungal fingerprints, the slow chemical etchings of patience that shaped continents. There's humility in realizing that everything familiar, every mountain, meadow, and garden was sculpted by something that doesn't even have a face. You pause beside a fallen tree half buried in the soil. The fungi feeding on it are small and dark, forming ripples like fossilized waves. You wonder what future scientists might find when they dig here in another few million years. Maybe your footprints faintly pressed into the dirt, surrounded by fungal patterns that outlast you. You smile. That's one way to join the fossil record. The thought isn't morbid. It's comforting. Because if the past billion years have proven anything, it's that fungi waste nothing, not even memory. They'll take what remains of you someday and write you into the next cycle, molecule by molecule. You'll feed a tree or a fern or maybe another mushroom. And that tree will drop leaves, those leaves will fall, and the fungi will start again. It's immortality through recycling, eternal life, just without the ceremony. You close your eyes and imagine the first fungi rising from the ocean, creeping over black stone. They didn't roar or bloom or conquer. They just spread, quietly, insistently, until the barren world turned soft enough for everything else to follow. When people talk about origins, they imagine explosions, beginnings wrapped in light. But maybe creation sounded like this, slow, damp, patient. The whisper of hyphae threading into rock, the sigh of soil being born. You open your eyes again. The forest looks the same, but it feels older now, heavier with context. Every mushroom, every root, every breath of earth is connected to that ancient lineage. You're standing on the bones of time, softened into loam by hands you'll never see. You crouch, place your palm on the ground, and say softly, "Thank you." And for a moment, you think you feel something answer, not in words, but in warmth. The soil is cool, yes, but beneath that coolness is life, and under that life, there's history stretching so far back that it almost circles around again. The wind shifts, leaves rustle. Somewhere in the dark, a single mushroom releases a puff of spores. You watch them drift upward, vanishing into the night. The same process that's been repeating for 1 billion years. Creation doesn't need fireworks. It just needs time. You walk until your legs ache a little, but the quiet keeps pulling you forward. The moonlight fades behind a wall of clouds, and for a few seconds, everything goes completely dark. It's not frightening, it's perfect. You pause, breathing slowly, and let your ears take over. You can hear the forest moving softly, rearranging itself. Roots shifting, leaves settling, mycelium breathing. It hits you then, everything you've seen tonight is part of a partnership older than language. Trees and fungi bound together by invisible threads. You crouch, scoop up a handful of soil, and let it fall through your fingers. This is what collaboration looks like, particles of decay and birth tangled together beyond separation. Under every forest on Earth, a quiet exchange is happening. Fungi wrap themselves around tree roots, forming microscopic sleeves called mycorrhizae. The tree offers sugar made from sunlight and air. The fungus returns minerals, phosphorus, nitrogen, magnesium, drawn up from deep underground. It's an economy of generosity, one that operates without greed or haste. You whisper, you give, you take, you share. No contracts, no debt. The ground under your hand vibrates faintly, or maybe it's just your pulse syncing with the rhythm of something older than humanity. The forest isn't competing. It's negotiating peace molecule by molecule. You stand and look around. The trees form a cathedral overhead, every trunk a pillar, every branch a bridge. You imagine the network beneath you, glowing faintly like neural circuitry, a billion filaments pulsing with a slow light of exchange. In a way, this is the Earth's nervous system. If the planet could think, it would think through these threads. Scientists have actually measured electrical signals moving through mycelium. They travel at about 1/10 the speed of a human nerve impulse. Too slow for thought as we know it, but fast enough for coordination. When one tree is attacked by insects, its neighbors connected through the fungal network begin producing defensive chemicals within hours. It's not consciousness, but it's something close enough to make you hesitate before dismissing it. You grin. So the forest really does gossip. It does more than that. Studies show that older, larger trees, so-called mother trees, use the network to send carbon to younger ones growing in their shade. Sometimes they even favor their own seedlings, sending more nutrients their way. A quiet act of care. The kind you'd never notice unless you looked beneath the surface. You reach out and touch a nearby trunk, the bark rough against your palm. Somewhere under that skin of wood, life is moving sideways, across roots, through threads, into the waiting hands of fungi, and back again. You can almost feel the generosity of it. No rivalry, no hoarding, just exchange. Maybe that's what balance really is. Not the absence of tension, but the presence of trust. You walk between two massive pines and notice how the light filters through their branches, scattering into soft beams. The air tastes faintly sweet, almost like resin. You take a deep breath, and for a moment, you can feel the forest inside you. Carbon dioxide out, oxygen in. A trait as old as time, invisible but mutual. It's the same rhythm repeating at every scale cell's roots, trees, air you. Everything feeding everything else. There's no above or below, no giver or receiver. Just circulation. You remember how earlier you thought about mushrooms as architects and doctors and hunters, but now they feel more like diplomats. They don't dominate the system, they moderate it. They make sure no one goes hungry, no one grows too greedy. And when something dies, they step in to translate that loss into nourishment for the living. You chuckle softly. The United Nations of dirt. You crouch again, brushing away a layer of leaves. Thin white threads stretch across the dark soil, glowing faintly when the moon slips through the clouds again. You can almost see the network working, delicate but resilient. Scientists still debate whether this symbiosis is truly cooperative or subtly parasitic. Does the fungus help the tree, or does it simply manipulate it for sugar? Maybe both. The forest doesn't care about labels. It only cares that balance is maintained. You think of how humans complicate relationships with words like ownership and debt. The forest, meanwhile, runs on a system of pure reciprocity. Give what you can, take what you need, and trust that everything returns eventually. You rest your hand on the ground again. The soil feels warm. Not in a metaphorical way, actually warm. Fungal metabolism generates heat as it breaks down organic matter. Even in winter, the forest's floor remains a few degrees warmer than the air above. Life is always at work, even when it looks asleep. You whisper, "You never really stop, do you?" Of course not. Mycelium can remain dormant for decades, waiting for the right humidity or the right root to touch. Patience is its only rule. That's how it outlives everything, by refusing to rush. You straighten up and look around. The trees sway gently, their movements subtle but synchronized, as though they've been listening the whole time. You feel small but not insignificant, just correctly sized for the world you're in. Somewhere beneath your feet, sugar is being traded for minerals. Carbon is being stored, then shared. The invisible diplomacy of the forest continues unaffected by your presence. You exhale and the forest inhales. The exchange continues. Maybe that's the real lesson tonight, that peace isn't the absence of motion, it's the perfect rhythm of give and take. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine every living thing on the planet connected by these threads, humans included, though most of us forget it. You smile softly. Maybe we've just been bad at seeing the wires. The forest hums its low, endless note. You let it fill the silence. And when you open your eyes again, the ground seems to pulse faintly under the moonlight, as if whispering, "You're part of this too." You follow the path until it widens into an open space. The air feels softer here, warmer. The forest hums a low, slow chord, a kind of invisible harmony you can't quite hear but somehow feel. You take one last look at the trees, their roots locked in an endless embrace, with the invisible threads below. The night has carried you through wonder, through quiet horror, through the smallest and the largest of lives. And now the story begins to fold in on itself, back to stillness, back to the heartbeat beneath your feet. You kneel one final time and press your palm flat to the earth. The ground is warm, faintly trembling with the pulse of billions of living cells. Everything you've seen, the glowing caps, the predatory traps, the vast underground webs, flows together here into this invisible river of patience. For a moment, you can almost sense the forest thinking, not in words or logic, but in something deeper, a collective awareness spread across centuries and soil. It's as if every mushroom you've met tonight is whispering the same message: you belong here too. The realization is so gentle you almost miss it. You've been walking through an ecosystem that accepts everything: birth, decay, fear, rest, and turns it all into balance. The fungi never resist the inevitable. They collaborate with it. You breathe that in and let it settle behind your ribs. You think about how humans chase permanence, how we build monuments to outlast time. Yet the forest thrives by surrendering to change. Even its grandest creations crumble, and that's not tragedy, it's design. Fungi understand that to let go is to give. A drop of water lands on your wrist, then another. Rain again, soft, rhythmic, forgiving. You tilt your face upward and let it wash over you. The scent of wet earth rises immediately, rich and grounding, carrying 1,000 stories of endings turned into beginnings. You smile. You never stop, do you? The forest doesn't answer, but it doesn't need to. The rain speaks for it. The same rain that feeds spores, the same water that drips into soil, the same rhythm that lulls everything to rest. You lie back on the damp ground, the earth molding itself around you. The canopy above shimmers faintly as lightning bugs weave lazy constellations through the leaves. The sound of droplets tapping against mushroom caps becomes a lullaby. Every inhale fills you with the scent of life renewing itself. Every exhale feels like permission to rest. You close your eyes. In your mind, you drift down through the soil past roots and stones into that glowing underworld where mycelium stretches like endless constellations. You see it, the web connecting every living thing, threads of silver light, pulsing with messages too soft for sound. The deeper you sink, the quieter it gets, until all that remains is the steady rhythm of exchange, breath for breath, life for life, decay for bloom. The boundaries between you and everything else begin to dissolve. You're not lying on the earth anymore. You're lying in it, woven into its rhythm. Your heartbeat slows. You imagine the spores drifting overhead, invisible, settling onto the world's next story. You think about how even in your absence, the forest will keep breathing, glowing, decomposing, growing. And somehow that's not sad. It's perfect. Because this isn't an ending. It's just another handoff in an endless conversation between life and sleep. The rain lightens. The forest exhales. You feel the night folding itself gently around you, as if the earth is tucking you in beneath its damp, fragrant blanket. The glow you saw earlier returns, not bright, just enough to trace the outlines of roots and stems in green firelight. Everything hums with the same quiet peace. You whisper, barely audible, "Thank you for letting me listen." The world answers with stillness. Your breathing slows. The sound of raindrops becomes softer, longer, further apart. The forest's pulse syncs with yours, steady and calm. You feel lighter with each breath, as if every worry you brought here has been composted into something gentler. And as your mind drifts towards sleep, you carry one last thought with you. Everything in nature has already learned how to rest, how to change, how to begin again. You just have to remember. Now let the forest hold you. Let the rhythm of rain, soil, and breath guide you down into quiet. The mushrooms are glowing. The ground is warm. The world is still turning. Good night.